The only good Indian is a dead Indian. In 1868, the landscape of the United States was a cauldron of political upheaval and societal change. February 24th marked the US House of Representatives' resolution to impeach President Andrew Johnson. By March 5th, the Senate had convened as a court of impeachment, summoning President Johnson to appear, signaling a turbulent time in American politics. Meanwhile, life in the expanding frontier pressed on with its own events. The world's first robbery of a railroad train occurred in Indiana on May 22nd, a stark indicator of the lawlessness spreading through the West. The political arena saw the Senate fail to convict President Johnson on May 26th, allowing him to narrowly escape removal from office. Amid these events, the 14th Amendment was ratified on July 28th, securing equal rights for all citizens except Native Americans. On July 25th, Congress organized the Wyoming Territory from parts of Dakota, Utah, and Idaho. The year also saw technological advances, with Thomas Edison patenting his first invention, an electrical vote recorder, on October 11th. Ulysses S. Grant was elected president on November 3rd, and on December 1st, John D. Rockefeller began his relentless war against competitors in the oil business. Amidst these seismic shifts, the Native American tribes who had lived on these lands for centuries faced an existential threat. The Cheyenne, Arapaho, and other tribes saw their way of life eroding under the relentless pressure of white settlers and the US military. The buffalo herds, which had once roamed the plains in vast numbers and were a cornerstone of the Native American way of life, were dwindling rapidly. The antelope, once plentiful, were now scarce. Tall Bull, a prominent Cheyenne leader, expressed this growing despair when he said, "We never did the white man any harm. We don't intend to. We are willing to be friends with the white man. The buffalo are diminishing fast." The antelope that were plenty a few years ago, they are now thin. When they shall all die, we shall be hungry. We shall want something to eat, and we will be compelled to come into the fort. Your young men must not fire at us. Whenever they see us, they fire, and we fire on them. His words captured the grim reality that was dawning on the Plains tribes. They were being pushed to the brink of survival. The memory of the Sand Creek Massacre, where peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho villagers were brutally slaughtered by US troops, haunted the tribes. Roman Nose, another Cheyenne warrior, spoke with a mix of defiance and sorrow to General Winfield Scott Hancock. Are not women and children more timid than men? The Cheyenne warriors are not afraid, but have you never heard of Sand Creek? Your soldiers look just like those who butchered the women and children there. Roman Nose's words were a stark reminder of the atrocities committed by the US military and the deep mistrust that now existed between the Native Americans and the white settlers. Black Kettle, a leader of the Southern Cheyenne, had once tried to foster peace with the white settlers, but he too had seen his efforts fail. Addressing a council at Medicine Creek Lodge, he lamented, "We were once friends with the whites, but you nudged us out of the way by your intrigues, and now when we are in council you keep nudging each other. Why don't you talk and go straight and let all be well?" His words reflected the frustration of a leader who had seen his attempts at peace repeatedly undermined by broken promises and deceit. In the spring of 1866, as Red Cloud prepared to fight for control of the Powder River country, a group of homesick Southern Cheyennes decided to head south for the summer. They longed to hunt buffalo along the Smoky Hill River and reconnect with old friends and relatives who had joined Black Kettle's band below the Arkansas River. Among those who traveled south were notable dog soldier chiefs, including Tall Bull, White Horse, Graybeard, and Bull Bear. The renowned war leader Roman Nose also accompanied them, as did the Bent brothers, who were of mixed Cheyenne and European descent. When they reached the Smoky Hill Valley, they encountered several young Cheyennes and Arapahoes who had slipped away from Black Kettle's and Little Raven's camps. These young warriors had come to Kansas to hunt, defying their chiefs who had signed the Treaty of 1865, relinquishing their tribe's rights to their ancestral hunting grounds. Roman Nose and the Dog Soldier chiefs dismissed the treaty, pointing out that they had not signed it and had no intention of abiding by its terms. Having recently come from the freedom of the Powder River country, they had little respect for chiefs who had surrendered tribal lands. While some of the returned exiles continued south to visit Black Kettle's people, most stayed behind. George Bent, one of the few who did make the journey, was particularly eager to see Black Kettle's niece, Magpie. After reuniting with her, George soon made her his wife. Upon rejoining Black Kettle's band, George found that their old friend Edward Wynkoop was now the agent for the Southern Cheyennes. Reflecting on this period, George Bent later said, "These were happy days for us. Black Kettle was a fine man and highly respected by all who knew him." However, Wynkoop soon learned that the Dog Soldiers were again hunting along the Smoky Hill. He travelled to their camp and tried to persuade the chiefs to sign the treaty and join Black Kettle's band. The Dog Soldiers refused, stating that they would never leave their country again. Wynkoop warned them that the US military might attack them if they remained in Kansas, but the chiefs were resolute, stating that they would live or die there. The only concession they made was a promise to restrain their young warriors. By late summer, the Dog Soldiers began hearing rumors of Red Cloud's successes against the US Army in the Powder River country. These stories inspired them, leading many bands to unite under Roman Nose's leadership with the goal of stopping travel along the Smoky Hill Road. During the Cheyennes' absence, a new stagecoach line had been established through the heart of their prime buffalo range. The Indians agreed that these stations must be eliminated if they were to halt the coaches and wagon trains. During this period, the Bent brothers, George and Charlie, came to a crossroads in their lives. George decided to follow Black Kettle, while Charlie became an ardent follower of Roman Nose. In October, during a meeting with their white father at Fort Zara, Charlie accused his brother and father of betraying the Cheyennes. His anger escalated to the point where he threatened to kill them both, and he had to be forcibly disarmed. Charlie rejoined the Dog Soldiers and led several raids against stage stations. He was later wounded in 1868, contracted malaria, and died in one of the Cheyenne camps. As autumn set in, Roman Nose and a group of warriors visited Fort Wallace and warned the Overland Stage Company's agent that if coaches continued to run through their country, the Cheyennes would begin attacking them within 15 days. However, a series of early snowstorms halted travel before Roman Nose could carry out his threats. The Dog Soldiers settled for a few minor raids on livestock corrals at the stage stations. With the onset of winter, they decided to establish a permanent camp in the Big Timbers on the Republican River and wait for spring. That winter, George Bent spent several weeks with the Kiowas trading for buffalo robes. When he returned to Black Kettle's village in the spring, he found the camp abuzz with rumors of a large force of bluecoats marching westward across the Kansas plains toward Fort Larned. Black Kettle convened a council and warned his people that the arrival of soldiers could only mean trouble. He ordered the tribe to pack up and move south toward the Canadian River. This decision proved prescient, as trouble soon followed. Wynkoop's messengers found most of the Dog Soldier leaders and persuaded 14 of them to come to Fort Larned to meet with General Hancock. Tall Bull, White Horse, Greybeard and Bull Bear brought about 500 lodges to Pawnee Creek, establishing a large camp about 35 miles from the fort. After a brief delay caused by a snowstorm, they rode into Fort Larned, many of them wearing the blue army coats they had captured in battles up north. General Hancock, wearing a similar coat adorned with shoulder ornaments and shiny medals, received them with a haughty, blustery demeanor. He displayed the power of his 1,400 soldiers, including the new 7th Cavalry commanded by George Armstrong Custer, whom the Cheyennes mockingly called hard backsides. Hancock had his artillerymen fire cannons as a show of force, which the Cheyennes found ominous. Despite the presence of their friend, Tall Chief Wynkoop, the Cheyenne leaders were suspicious of Hancock from the start. Their mistrust deepened when Hancock summoned them to a night council, which they considered a bad omen. "I don't find many chiefs here," Hancock complained. "What is the reason? I have a great deal to say to the Indians, but I want to talk to them all together. Tomorrow I am going to your camp." The Cheyennes were deeply troubled by this statement, as their women and children, many of whom had survived the Sand Creek Massacre, were back in the camp. They feared that Hancock might bring his 1,400 soldiers and cannons down upon them. In Kansas, several forts stood as silent witnesses to the tense negotiations and confrontations between the U.S. military and Native American tribes. An agent managed to arrange a meeting between some leaders, including Black Kettle and Stonecalf, and General Sheridan at Fort Larned. Upon seeing Sheridan with his short legs, thick neck, and long swinging arms, the Indians likened him to a bad-tempered bear. During the council, Wynkoop asked the general if he could issue arms to the Indians. "Yes, give them arms," Sheridan growled, "and if they go to war, my soldiers will kill them like men." Stonecalf retorted, "Let your soldiers grow long hair so that we can have some honor in killing them." The council was anything but friendly, and though Wynkoop managed to procure a few outdated rifles for them, the Cheyennes and Arapahoes, who remained to hunt below the Arkansas, were uneasy. Many young men and most of the dog soldier bands were still north of the river, some raiding and killing white men whenever possible. By late August, most of the Cheyennes in the north had gathered along the Arikari fork of the Republican River. Tall Bull, White Horse, and Roman Nose were there with about 300 warriors and their families. A few Arapahoes and Pawnee Killers Sioux were camped nearby. From Bull Bear, who was camped with his band on the Solomon, they heard that General Sheridan had organized a company of scouts to hunt down Indian camps. However, these Indians were too busy gathering meat for winter to worry about scouts or soldiers finding them. Then, one day in the moon, when the deer paw the earth, on September 16th, a hunting party of Sioux from Pawnee Killers Camp spotted about 50 white men going into camp on the Arikari, about 20 miles below the Indian camps. Only 3 or 4 of the white men wore blue uniforms. The others were dressed in rough frontier clothing. This was the special company organized by Sheridan to search out Indian camps. They were known as Forsyth's Scouts. As soon as the Sioux hunters alerted their people, Pawnee Killer sent runners to the Cheyenne camp to ask them to join in an attack on the white scouts who had invaded their hunting grounds. Tall Bull and White Horse immediately sent criers through their camps, urging the warriors to ready their war rigs and put on their battle paint. They went to see Roman Nose, who was in his teepee undergoing purification ceremonies. A few days earlier, when the Cheyennes had gone to feast with the Sioux, a Sioux woman had used an iron fork to cook fried bread, which Roman Nose did not discover until after he had eaten. Any metal touching his food was against his medicine. Roman Nose's magic power to escape the white men's bullets was worthless until he completed the purification ceremonies. The Cheyenne chiefs accepted this belief, but Tall Bull urged Roman Nose to hurry the ceremonies and restore his medicine. Tall Bull was confident that the Cheyennes and Sioux together could destroy 50 white scouts, but if companies of bluecoats were nearby, they would soon need Roman Nose to lead them in battle. Roman Nose told them to go ahead. He would come when ready. Due to the long distance to the soldier scouts' camp, the chiefs decided to wait until daylight to attack. Riding their best war ponies and armed with their finest lances, bows and rifles, 500 or 600 warriors moved down the Arikari Valley. The Sioux wore their eagle feather bonnets, the Cheyennes wore their crow feather bonnets. Not far from the scouts' camp, they halted, with the chiefs issuing strict orders that no small parties were to go out alone to attack the enemy. All would attack together, as Roman Nose had taught them. They would ride over the scouts and wipe them out. Despite the warnings, 6 Sioux and 2 Cheyennes, all very young men, slipped out before sunrise and attempted to capture the white men's horse herd. They charged in at dawn, yelling and waving blankets to stampede the stock. A few animals were captured, but the young braves had alerted Forsyth's scouts to the presence of Indians. Before the main body of Sioux and Cheyennes could charge the exposed camp, the scouts moved to a small island in the dry bed of the Arikari, taking cover among the willow brush and tall grass. Across the misted valley, the Indians charged in a broad front, their ponies' hooves drumming on the earth. As they closed in on the scouts hurrying to the brushy island, one of the Cheyenne warriors blasted a bugle. They had intended to overrun the camp, but instead had to swerve into the dry stream bed. A burst of fire from the scouts' Spencer-repeating rifles raked the first ranks, causing the charging warriors to split left and right, sweeping around the island. For most of the morning, the Indians circled the island. The only targets were the scouts' horses standing in the high grass. As the warriors shot the animals down, the scouts used them as breastworks. A few warriors made individual charges upon the island, dismounting and trying to creep up on the scouts through the brush, but the quick rifle fire was too strong. A Cheyenne named Wolfbelly made 2 mounted charges right through the defense ring of scouts. Wearing his magic panther skin, he believed it gave him such strong medicine that no bullet touched him. Early in the afternoon, Roman Nose arrived on the field and took a position on high ground overlooking the island. Most of the warriors stopped fighting, waiting to see what Roman Nose would do. Tall Bull and White Horse spoke with him, but did not ask him to lead them in battle. Then an old man, White Contrary, came by and said, "Here is Roman Nose, the man we depend upon, sitting behind this hill." Roman Nose laughed, having already decided what he would do that day. He knew he would die, but he laughed at what the old man said. "All those people fighting out there feel that they belong to you," White Contrary continued, "and they will do all that you tell them, and here you are behind this hill." Roman Nose went off to one side, preparing himself for battle by painting his forehead yellow, his nose red and his chin black. He then donned his single-horned war bonnet with 40 feathers in its tail. When ready, he mounted his horse and rode down to the dry riverbed, where the warriors awaited him to lead them in a victorious charge. They started at a slow trot, increased to a gallop, and then lashed their ponies without mercy so nothing could stop them from riding over the island. But once again, the firepower of Forsyth's scouts cut down the front ranks, diminishing the force of the desperate charge. Roman Nose reached the outer fringes of the willows. Then, crossfire caught him above the hips, a bullet penetrating his spine. He fell into the brush and lay there until dusk, when he managed to crawl to the bank. Some young warriors searching for him found him, carried him to the high ground, where Cheyenne and Sioux women tended the wounded, and during the night, Roman Nose died. For the young Cheyenne warriors, Roman Nose's death was like a great light extinguished in the sky. He had believed and made them believe that if they fought for their land as Red Cloud was doing, they would one day win. Neither the Cheyennes nor the Sioux had any appetite for more fighting, but they kept Forsyth's scouts besieged in the brush and sand for 8 days. The scouts had to eat their dead horses and dig in the sand for water. On the 8th day, when a relief column of soldiers arrived, the Indians were ready to leave the island's stench. The white men glorified this fight, calling it the Battle of Beecher's Island, after young Lieutenant Frederick Beecher, who was killed there. The survivors boasted they had killed hundreds of redskins, though the Indians counted no more than 30. However, the loss of Roman Nose was incalculable. They would always remember it as the fight when Roman Nose was killed. After resting from the siege, a considerable number of Cheyennes began moving south. With soldiers now hunting them everywhere, their only hope of survival lay with their relatives below the Arkansas. Though they saw Black Kettle as a beaten old man, he was still alive and was the chief of the southern Cheyennes. They had no way of knowing that Sheridan, the soldier chief who resembled an angry bear, was planning a winter campaign below the Arkansas. When the snows of the cold moons came, he would send Custer and his pony soldiers to destroy the villages of the savage Indians, most of whom had kept their treaty obligations. To Sheridan, Any Indian who resisted when fired upon was a savage. During that autumn, Black Kettle established a village on the Washita River, 40 miles east of the Antelope Hills. As the young men drifted back from Kansas, he scolded them for their errant ways, but, like a forgiving father, accepted them back into his band. In November, when he heard rumors of soldiers approaching, he and Little Robe, along with 2 Arapaho leaders, made a journey of nearly 100 miles down the Washita Valley to Fort Cobb, the headquarters for their new agency south of the Arkansas. General William B. Hazen, commander of the fort, had been friendly and sympathetic during their summer visits. However, on this urgent occasion, Hazen was not cordial. When Black Kettle requested permission to move his 180 lodges near Fort Cobb for protection, Hazen refused. He also denied permission for the Cheyennes and Arapahoes to join Kiowa and Comanche villages. General William B. Hazen assured Black Kettle that if his people stayed peaceful and kept their young men in their villages, they would not be attacked. Despite this promise, Hazen knew of Sheridan's plans for war. On November 26th, Black Kettle and his delegation, weary from their journey, returned to their village. Black Kettle, determined not to be caught by surprise again, planned to meet with the soldiers to negotiate peace. On the morning of November 27th, Black Kettle awoke to clear skies but soon heard cries warning of approaching soldiers. Realizing the danger, he attempted to mobilize his people for flight. As he prepared to escape, he saw soldiers charging from multiple directions. Despite his efforts to signal peace, Black Kettle was shot and killed, along with his wife. General George Armstrong Custer followed orders to destroy Black Kettle's village and its ponies, resulting in a massacre where most of the 103 Cheyenne killed were non-warriors. The soldiers also captured 53 women and children. The arrival of Arapahoes and other tribes led to further conflict. Custer, facing increasing resistance, retreated to Camp Supply, where Sheridan celebrated the victory. General Philip Sheridan falsely claimed that Black Kettle had refused sanctuary and was killed in battle. Critics like Tall Chief Wynkoop condemned Sheridan's actions as betrayal. Sheridan, supported by Sherman, continued his campaign and ordered friendly tribes to surrender or face destruction. Late in December, the survivors of Black Kettle's band began arriving at Fort Cobb. They had to come on foot because Custer had killed all of their ponies. Little Robe was now the nominal leader of the tribe, and when he was taken to see Sheridan, he told the bear-like soldier chief that his people were starving. Custer had burned their winter meat supply. They could find no buffalo along the Washita. They had eaten all their dogs. The tribe came into Fort Cobb and surrendered unconditionally. Sheridan added, "You cannot make peace now and commence killing whites again in the spring. If you are not willing to make a complete peace, you can go back and we will fight this thing out." Little Robe knew there was but one answer he could give. "It is for you to say what we have to do," he said. Yellow Bear of the Arapahoes also agreed to bring his people to Fort Cobb. A few days later, Tosawi brought in the first band of Comanches to surrender. When he was presented to Sheridan, Tosawi's eyes brightened. He spoke his own name and added 2 words of broken English. "Tosawi, good Indian," he said. It was then that General Sheridan uttered the immortal words, "The only good Indians I ever saw were dead." Lieutenant Charles Nordstrom, who was present, remembered the words and passed them on until in time they were honed into an American aphorism. The only good Indian is a dead Indian. Little Robe and other leaders, including the survivors of Black Kettle's band, eventually surrendered at Fort Cobb. During the harsh winter, tribes relied on government rations. In the spring of 1869, Cheyenne and Arapaho groups were relocated to reservations with ongoing tension between factions. Tall Bull, a dog soldier chief, led his people north to join Red Cloud's forces. However, they were eventually attacked by General Carr's troops. Tall Bull's warriors fought back fiercely. but many were killed, including Tall Bull himself. In summary, the Cheyenne people faced significant losses and betrayals, including the deaths of key leaders like Black Kettle and Tall Bull. The violence and displacement continued as they struggled to survive and resist further encroachment on their lands. Roman Nose was dead, Black Kettle was dead, Tall Bull was dead. Now they were all good Indians.